Welcome back to Scotland Talks, bringing you less stress and more success with the power of joy. How amazing is that? Thank you so much for being here again today. Please like and subscribe. I love bringing you this content, but it does take effort, time, and money. So please continue to support the show. You can listen on a variety of the audio platforms, and you can watch it on YouTube and elsewhere. So thank you so much. Today, I'm super excited to have a wonderful person in the studio who has some incredibly useful things to share with us. Callie Patrick. Hi, Callie.
Hi.
Callie is a sleep and wellness specialist, sleep and well-being specialist. She really helps those who are struggling with sleep to find healthy solutions. And she helps those of us or those of you who may have halfway decent habits prevent a lifetime of frustration, sickness, mental cloudiness, and just not being in your full well-being. So welcome, Callie. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
So when did you start really focusing on the subject of sleep?
Yeah, it's interesting because, someone who has a business or a practice is often told, well, you need to find your niche, right? You need to really discover who it is that you're going to help. And I really just sort of worked with people who wanted to feel healthier and better for several years, right? I was a mind-body wellness coach. So I worked with people who were stressed, who dealt with emotional and stress eating, who had chronic pain, because that was another experience that I had. And certainly the sleep and insomnia, which I also suffered from for about 20 years.
Wow.
And after doing that for a while, I was thinking about this idea of what is my niche, right? And I was thinking about, okay, these are all things that are pillars of health, but like, what is the core? Like, what is the foundation of living your best and being your best self and being your healthiest? And every time I thought about it, sleep really felt like the right aspect to address first, right? Because if you're tired or you're sleep deprived, you're much less likely to want to move and exercise. And so then we have problems with, being active and getting the amount of exercise that's necessary. Of course, if you're looking to lose weight or maintain your weight, making healthy food choices requires energy, and it requires some planning and effort. So that, of course, is affected when we're sleep deprived. And of course, there's this tight coupling between stress and anxiety with sleep deprivation. And so if you're stressed, you're not sleeping. If you're not sleeping, you're more stressed. So it really felt like the place to land to help people unclog everything else that might be troubling them.
And I think it's a place that is exercise and diet, we're just overwhelmed with content on exercise and diet.
Mm-hmm.
But sleep which is part of the problem, I think, it gets pushed to the back corner, swept under the carpet. Well, if you're going to survive, at some point your body will just fall over and sleep. So other than that, and in this culture where it's go, do,
Absolutely.
we don't have that sort of French, like we take 2 months of vacation a year. My husband worked for a French tech company for several years. And it was just so interesting seeing like a totally different, they very much kept to their business hours. No one did overtime, good, bad, or indifferent for maybe the company, but compared to the American lifestyles that we're so used to being a part of, it was different.
Absolutely. We definitely have a culture of being always on, always going. I'll sleep when I'm dead. And unfortunately, not sleeping well does increase your risk of most chronic diseases.
Yeah.
And also from dying of those chronic diseases.
Yeah.
So it's very, very important.
Yeah. So let me, so I'll ask you this. So I'll start with my own question, which is just, I grew up in a family that was very health-minded. Sleep was very important. Bedtimes were strictly enforced and all of that. As an adult, my schedule varies a lot. I have a podcast this Saturday night at 10 p.m. I mean, it's just like things happen and my publicist set it up, so I can't really say no. I travel a lot, also between time zones around the world. So I realized that in normal everyday life, staying on a somewhat of a schedule is really vital and important, but
Mhm.
also that in real life, it isn't always possible every single day. I'm kind of that person where I kind of like getting stuck in this all or nothing rut. It's either like, oh, I'm doing it perfectly. And then I have one day that throws me off and I'm like, oh, forget it. Like I just totally messed up. And so my question to you is, what's the best way to handle things like your schedule changing and not being able to be as regular with your sleep, get up at this time, go to bed?
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, certainly that does add a challenge, right? If you're able to have a consistent wake time,
Mhm.
almost more important than bedtime.
Interesting. Okay,
Um,
good. That's good.
you're able to have a consistent wake time and bedtime. And if you have any rituals or routines
Mhm.
around that, I mean,
Mhm.
oftentimes we have something, but we don't think of it as a ritual, right?
Mhm.
Most people wake up and they get out of bed and they do a certain number of things,
Yes.
but we don't think about them. They're just sort of
Mhm.
autopilot, right? So I have a whole thing about routines and rituals, but um, I think when the schedule changes, it definitely becomes much harder. And so, what I would, suggest, putting on an expert hat as opposed to a coaching hat here, is that a person who has a situation like that, like yourself, would find some touch points throughout the day, not necessarily to have a ritual or a routine, but to just work in some rest and rejuvenation, right? And I'm talking 5 minutes, I'm talking 15 minutes. I have a bunch of different techniques to help people do that, because oftentimes people think, well, I don't have a half an hour to get to to do a meditation, or I don't have an hour to go to an exercise class. So what can you do in 5 to 15 minutes? There are some very useful techniques that a person can learn and do in that amount of time to sort of restore balance to the nervous system, right? When we're going, and we're expending energy, there's that stress response, there's that sort of stimulation that happens in the system. If we can recover, if we can rest and relax just a little bit, just to take some of that edge off, right? And we can do that at various points throughout the day, that just reminds your system what that feels like. And usually, when people are able to do that, they have a better experience of sleep at night, whether that's falling asleep or falling back to sleep if they've woken up. It sort of helps prevent some of that mind chatter from coming in. And, predictability of any kind is going to be restful. It's going to be stress reducing. So maybe that's a meal, right? Maybe you always have a meal or a snack at a particular time. Or maybe that time varies, but it's always a similar snack, right? So anytime we're um, in this place where we can predict, where we know what's coming, right? As we've seen over the past couple of years, when you don't know what's coming at all, it's very stressful and it's
Yeah.
very hard on the system. So any predictability that you can introduce can
Throughout
be
your day, then.
helpful throughout the
So
day.
not just.
I often point people to the day, because they think the problem is at night, and the nighttime reflects the daytime.
Mhm.
So if you can make some tweaks to the daytime, usually the nighttime works itself out, but it's knowing what things to do, and routine and rhythm is part of that.
Yeah.
And one last very important thing about that is that you have to know how to rest
Yeah.
to be able to sleep. If you're one
Okay.
of
So
those
now we're
people who
touching on that.
never sit still, who can't, right, then of course you're going to have problems sleeping, because
Yes.
you're the same person, whether you're sitting
Yes.
there in a chair during the day or you're laying in bed at
Yes.
night. So,
So I totally relate to that because I'm kind of a switched on person. That's just sort of how I am. My mom is like twice as much. I don't know how she sleeps, but she sleeps great. Anyway,
well, good for her.
pure exhaustion possibly. But anyway, um, but so one of my biggest challenges is switching the mind off.
Mm-hmm.
And I find this more difficult with working from home because this whole work-life integration situation is constant. We have now the benefits, and a lot of my clients will say the same thing. We now have the benefits where we can take off a couple hours to go to an appointment or go to a kid's game or whatever we need to do. But then we have an obligation that really can't be avoided to do our work in the evening, because then, so in a way our life works better, but I don't necessarily think our schedules are better. I think they're more chaotic. And then when I work until late in the evening, it's very hard to turn my mind off. Also, just even if you're just watching TV, that can get my mind going, not turning it off. So it's a real challenge. And I'm that kind of person. I have the tablet by the side of my bed. I write down to do things as I think of them. But going to sleep has always been my challenge. It's not so much staying asleep for me personally. It's just that initial going to sleep.
Yes. I hear the mind chatter a lot.
Yeah.
And this is a symptom of, right, working right up until bedtime, right? There isn't that time of clearing. So, I would ask someone like yourself, well, what are you doing to support your sleep? What are you doing to help not just clear your mind? Because I think many people get into these ideas where, well, I need to distract myself, right? I'm thinking about work. And to help myself sleep, I'm going to distract myself with a television program. Right? But that's just taking the stimulation from work to the content of the television show. And you just mentioned, well, I get all, you get into the program.
Or you're like, next, because like, it was that time an hour ago, but I can't stop now.
Yes. And they can't stop. This is really a core piece of it for most people. It's learning how to set and maintain boundaries, and boundaries with ourselves, right? That it's important to me to be able to rest and be able to sleep. Therefore, there is, maybe some sacrifice or trade-off, right? And a lot of clients that I work with also have, issues with other people in their life. I was just
going to say, right? How do you live in the same house with other people then?
Yeah, I mean, living in the same house, living with people who are far away, who are, maybe struggling, you want to be supportive, you want to listen to them. And all of that is stimulation, and all of that is energy that you are taking in by, being there for them. So, a lot of the work I do is helping people really set boundaries with themselves. Part of how we do that is really figure out, what is the motivation? Like, why do I want to do this? What is important to me about sleeping better, right? No one comes to me and says, I want to sleep better for the sake of sleeping better, right? Well, how does that feel for you? How does that change your life when you start sleeping better, right? And when we connect with that deep why, then when that challenge comes of, well, do I watch another show? Right? If we can call that up, if we can feel like, oh, in 6 months, this is what my life is going to be like because I have made this choice.
I love that, actually. I really do, because then it's more cause and effect. And I think, as so often is the case, we tend to focus on problems and symptoms instead of the desired result. So we're focusing on the negative, not manifesting, if you want to use that word, I use it cautiously, but not manifesting the positive outcome, which is absolutely, I know one thing I did with my husband, he's in sales. He's like very organized around finances. And he has this habit of talking to me about bills at like 10:30 at night, right when we're going to sleep. Did you pay the power bill? Did you? And I'm like, like, no, bills. Now I'm thinking about money. And then he's like, okay, good night. And I'm like, oh my goodness. Just like, I can't believe you did it. So I told him, sometimes he forgets it. Like, here, I have a rule now. From 10 p.m. to 8 a.m., no talk of finances ever. Unless a house is burning down or something of that magnitude. Right. Those are my 12 hours off. You have 12 hours all day to talk to me about bills and finance. But that's one of those things that gets me going, right? At night. And I'm just like, and not really him. He'll just go to sleep. But I'm like, I'm the one who's like,
Yes. And I have the exact same situation, right? My boyfriend and I are on a different sleep schedule, right? He's a night person, I'm a morning person. So same kind of thing. Like when we would come together, it's discussion of house things.
Yeah.
We live in a 1920s house that's got a lot of projects, right? So there's just like, okay, well, did we call this person? Did we set that up? I
Yeah.
can't. This is not before bed.
To-dos.
Yeah, no, we need to make, and what you did and said, this is my time frame, right? And we actually have a Saturday morning conversation about those things.
Nice. I
Like
find it,
each
that's
week.
perfect. Like there's a designated time.
Mhm.
I might shy away from the designated time, but just being on. But another thing I did in my own life was, for example, so we talk about practicing getting still, practicing having a still mind. And for the really go-go person, it's sometimes harder to get into a practice of meditation because it's so boring and still, like we just want to climb the walls.
Yes.
But then when you finally get into it, then you have people, especially now and everyone working from home in the house, pets, dogs, husbands tapping on your office door. And so I literally got on Amazon and I bought door hangers that say things like, do not disturb, meditation in progress. Because the polite asks, it wasn't that he wasn't trying to honor them. He just kept forgetting. Like, I'm like, okay, well, here you go. I'm going to put it out. I won't leave it out for hours just to like hide. I will put it out when I'm using it, when I need it to not be disturbed. And then when I'm done, I'll open my door and I'll take it off. And that was really helpful because I couldn't get that still time during the day. And it was a good place to start anyway.
Right. And the other interesting thing about, as you're speaking about that is, you created a support for yourself, right? I've had clients literally lock themselves in a room.
Yeah.
Right.
No, yeah. Done it.
It's necessary, right?
Yes.
But the other thing I think a lot of people don't realize, meditation has become, oh, let me listen to this thing to help me fall asleep. Or I need to sit still and that's just not me because I'm a go person. And I put myself in that category as well, even though I've really tamed down over the years from doing these practices. But from a therapeutic yoga and meditation perspective, we work with where you're at. So if you're the kind of person who's going to be moving around and twitching around, then let's do a meditation practice that moves you. That if you're someone whose mind runs off, then let's do a breathing practice that you have to pay attention to mentally so that there's no possible way for you to be thinking about your to-do list.
Which is really, really brilliant. And I have found those pieces. So my number one choice for meditation when I have moved into that space is I like music background or nature sounds or something. I like a track without words. That's kind of my bliss place meditation. When I can't get my mind to stop, then I use guided meditation because it does help me to stay focused. And then if I can't sit still, if I'm just having one of those days, then I do a walking meditation. So I still put on, I put on my earphones and I do, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, which the walk isn't going to hurt you anyway, but it's better than nothing. Again, probably guided so that you can't start thinking about the laundry you didn't start yet or whatever. And then at home too, I mean, I know a lot of people have done this now because of COVID and working from home, but like getting the noise canceling headphones is hugely helpful. If you have a house with like barking dogs or noisy kids, or sometimes I even wear them when I go to bed, just if this house isn't quiet enough yet, just to kind of get that, take it down because it's just, you're so hyper alert. It has, unless I have quiet, unless I'm laying horizontally, I basically can't sleep, which doesn't look great on planes, but.
Right.
Really not well.
Your point here is that, life is very stimulating. There are so many avenues where our senses are just being, bombarded with sounds, right? We heard the sounds in my background, right? The lights, the people, the information, right? The content of the information, the screens, like everything all together. For most of my clients, they have a hyper aroused nervous system, almost to the level of vigilance.
Yes.
Right? And if you think about being vigilant, sleep is not compatible.
Yes.
Right.
This is so interesting that you said that because I was just sharing my story on another podcast right before this, how I grew up in a very isolated environment way out in the country, homeschooled, no other social interaction really almost at all. And no TV permitted. It was more of like a religious movement choice back then, kind of a thing. Basically no radio. There were no noise or lights. There was nature. We lived on 160 acres in the middle of nowhere. So with nature, I developed this huge comfort zone where I go to nature to get my equilibrium back. So that was a gift. Yeah. However, to go from zero stimulation to now, I also am like, okay, I understand why it's hard for me to go to sleep. I used to go to sleep listening to crickets, literally, Yes. No car sounds, nothing. So why I've had to wear earplugs most of my adult life to sleep, because so it's like, okay, so you go from zero stimulation to overstimulation. I'm still the same person, but I'm reacting differently. Right?
Yes. And I work with people sometimes who say that, well, this never used to bother me.
Yeah.
Right? This sound never used to wake me up.
Yeah.
Or this drink, or whatever it is, right? And the way I describe it is, we all have a cup, right? And the cup has some baseline of water in it, right? And it depends how much you've taken out of it, right? Have you rested? Have you meditated? Have you walked? Have you done something to regroup?
Yeah.
Right? Or do you just keep adding? At some point, the cup overflows.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's usually the point where people are really suffering from night after night of not sleeping, of severe mind chatter, of feeling the effects, the present time effects in their health and well-being and their mood, on having not had quality sleep.
So it's also cumulative then. It's like it's cumulative. Exactly. It builds and builds and builds. And it's just like, what we use is like almost like passive aggressive behavior, but in our sleep, right? Where you're just like, okay, I can do more, I can do more, I can do more, I can do more. And then all of a sudden you're like, I'm so tired, I can't sleep. And you're like, what happened?
Yes. And I love to equate sleep with surrender. Sleep isn't something you control. It's something you influence. The same thing with meditation in your mind. You don't control your mind. You don't stop your thoughts. You influence them.
That's good.
You direct them. You focus them. And what's nice about the cumulative effect is it works the other way.
Oh, yeah.
You do these practices for 5 minutes. The more frequently you do them, the longer that you do them, right, the more that effect builds. And the easier time you start to notice that you have, and we're not even working on sleep in some way, right? We're working on the other stuff,
which is the whole balance.
Exactly. So let's let the sleep go and let's focus on all the other stuff. And then suddenly it's like, oh, I don't have to work so hard on my sleep.
Yes. Excellent. No, this is so much. I just love this because it's so much about what I teach in balance and addressing all the different areas of your life. And yet I've rarely done much work, with clients. I'm not an expert on sleep, but around sleep, I think it gets really neglected. I have one other question before we wrap up, which was something you said earlier, which was sometimes getting up at the same time is even more important than getting to bed at exactly the same time. So I've just recently started doing this, getting up significantly earlier, having some accountability partners that I connect with later that day, and doing some minimal physical exercise and activity right away. I am not a morning person at all. This has been like one of the banes of my existence, probably because I have trouble going to sleep and then I don't want to wake up. And but I did grow up in this family that was very health-minded and very much you need your 8 hours of sleep. And I think somehow that formula literally like adhered to my brain where I literally, if I just go to sleep naturally because I'm tired, I will wake up 8 hours later, almost to the minute. It's crazy. I mean, it's so strange, but normally I don't get to sleep quite that long. So my question is, how do you know that, how are you still getting rested if you still get up early if you're tired? So what if one day, for example, I want to clarify one last piece. So even last night, I did go to bed at a certain time And then I got distracted, and then I got distracted again. And then I started thinking. So an hour into it, I reset my alarm an hour later because I'm like, I'm going to be so tired in the morning. So help me.
Yes. And I hear that so much, right? Oh, well, I didn't sleep the night before, so I slept in to catch up, to make up for it. Right. And, I hear a couple of interesting things in your situation, right? The first is you're not a morning person, right? The second is this sounds like it's requiring a lot of discipline.
Yeah.
It's requiring accountability.
Yep.
It's requiring you to be talking to other people about, did I do it or not?
Right.
I'm not hearing a lot of your own motivation, right?
Yes.
What about this is important to you? Lacking that vision, lacking that internal reason, it's going to be very hard.
That's really
not impossible, but very much harder than it needs to be, right? So the first thing I would suggest is get clear on why you want to do this. If all that fell apart,
right?
If you didn't have your buddies, if you didn't have your if you go walk with somebody and you're I have to meet that person.
Right.
If all that went away, I'm assuming that you wouldn't do it. Right. So then all your motivation and all your accountability is external, and that is never sustainable.
Enough. It's really interesting that you say that too, because I would say yes. And if I hadn't been for that, I probably wouldn't have started in a short term. And then 2 to 3 weeks in, I started feeling the benefits so significantly that I now have much more motivation. So I used to sleep in trying to wake up rested. And now, because I have done the hard discipline, which hopefully won't be like a discipline forever, I've realized that I woke up more energized earlier, and that I had probably been oversleeping my whole life by maybe an hour. Because if I sleep that extra hour that I think I need, I wake up groggy. If I get up an hour earlier, when I used to just sleep straight through naturally, I'm more alert. So it's very interesting.
There's so much interesting stuff there. You mentioned that, and I mentioned my Sleep Academy course to you earlier.
Yes.
There's information in there about what times actually are best to go to bed, what times are best to wake up, just how we're designed naturally to be in the rhythms of nature. And there is a difference sometimes with just, a half an hour or an hour.
Yeah.
And you can wake up and feel like, okay, I'm riding that wave of energy versus, oh, I'm pushing up against a time of feeling a little bit more sluggish, and then it's hard to get going, right? The other thing I heard you say there was that you moved your time significantly. I'm a big advocate of moving time, in small increments.
I will admit, I did it like an hour to a half hour at a time over a couple weeks, not months, but weeks. So moved, I would say, 2 to 2.5 hours.
Right. I usually move people around 15 minutes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. At a time. Small wins.
That's great.
As you probably know, are super important, right? We want to have success. And, for some people, I work with people, sometimes they're not getting to bed till 3 a.m. So getting back to 1 a.m. is a huge win.
Yes, absolutely.
But to do that all at once just doesn't happen. So we start in 15-minute increments. And one last point about the wake time. Yes, sometimes when we're readjusting, when we're properly motivated internally to make these changes, there will be some days where, okay, you didn't sleep that night. So the alarm goes off, the temptation is there, and you say, well, okay, I'm getting up anyway. Because what happens is the sleep pressure builds throughout the day. So if you started tired, that pressure continues to build. You're essentially setting yourself up for a more restful, efficient quality sleep the next night.
Yes, I see
that might take a couple days.
Yes.
Of almost feeling worse to feel better.
Yes, like you kind of just drop into bed and go.
Right. And then you reset, you've retrained yourself. And, depending on a person's current situation, there's some obviously differences there. But in general, we want that sleep pressure to build up, which is another reason why naps are questionable.
Mm-hmm.
It depends, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because every time, if you're taking a nap, you're reducing sleep pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And there are times when that's appropriate, but how
Mm-hmm.
much and when and
Yes.
why,
Yeah.
super important.
I'm not a nap person, but if I do, I usually do the 20-minute rule. Like if I
Mhm.
just feel like I'm gonna die because of, something the night before, whatever. Very rare, but that I know that it's different times and amounts and how late in the day.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
sure.
going into deeper sleep. But agreed. So this is so, so helpful. And I love everything you said has reinforced what I knew. And then you've added a whole bunch more of really important things. Like that was a real question I literally have been thinking about lately, which is getting up at the same time, even if I'm really exhausted, and how does that, carry over?
Mhm.
So Callie, wow, this has gone so fast because it's been so fun and so much great content. Oh my goodness. But tell everyone where they can find out more about you and find out more about your sleep course.
Sure, sure. So my website is callipatrick.com. I'm also under callisleepcoach.com, and that's Kali. And on the site, people can either book a clarity call with me. I do a free consultation for 30 minutes to see if coaching is an appropriate solution for folks. They can also look into my sleep videos, which are about sleep mindset. We didn't even talk about that, right? What do you say to yourself when
Wow.
you're up in the middle of the night and you can't get back to sleep? You
Yes.
stupid idiot, right? Or
Yes.
tomorrow's going to suck, right? So that's an important component we haven't even touched on, so they can grab some free videos around that. And then my sleep course called the Sleep Academy is essentially a 6-week online training, which is models the one-on-one coaching I do with folks across 12 weeks. Of course, it's abbreviated and more generalized, but you'll find information in there about sleep and stress, about those sleep times, and also those 5 to 15-minute techniques. I have 4 of those in there that you can sort of modify your energy up or down and start building that cumulative effect that we
Yeah.
were talking about.
That is fantastic. So again, the best URL or the number one was callipatrick.com. So if
Yes.
not the, so Kali Patrick, Patrick, Patrick.com.
Right.
And this morning was actually an example. So I'm going to have to go now and do the course and find out more information about the sleep mindset, because so this morning I woke up about 2 hours before I was supposed to get up and realized, and I had important meetings this morning. I had to get up. I had to get ready. And I looked over on my phone and realized that my phone cord had stopped working and it was basically dead. Like the battery was blinking red and it was still on, but clearly I couldn't trust my alarm to go off. So then I had to get up. I'm running around the house. I can't find the other cord. I'm running out to the car in my bare feet. I'm coming back in. I'm like, now that I almost had this adrenaline rush, like, because I couldn't miss this very important meeting. Now I need to go back to sleep.
Yeah, and you're breathless just telling me the story. So I'm not hearing sleep coming anytime soon.
It was like it was a very weird. I actually thought when I was this morning, I said, well, this was my brain kind of going into a mild fight or flight reaction, which was something bad is going to happen. Really wake up, get clear, find the solution, which took way longer than it should have. And then where do you go from there? Should I just go up? But then I got to bed late. So I'm going to be learning about sleep mindset because I think that's amazing.
Yes, yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. And do you have any social media that you want people to check out, or just go straight to the website?
Yeah, I'm mostly on Twitter and LinkedIn, and all those social media that people can follow me. Oh, YouTube also, I have lots of videos on there. People can find any of those links from the bottom of my website. So those are all there.
So good listening. All right. Thank you so much, Callie, for being here. I wish everyone a joyful week that is very restful. And if you check out Callie's website, you'll probably have more rest, which will bring you more joy, more well-being. We want to live the most abundant and a happy life that we can. So when we can make these little changes, nothing dramatic, nothing hard, little changes every day to give us a really happy and joyful life. Who wouldn't want to do that if they could? So thank you, Callie. And I really appreciate your time, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you again for joining me here on Scottlin Talks. I'm so glad to have you here as always. Please do like and subscribe, and also check out my Instagram lives. That's Monday morning at 9 a.m. Pacific. That's noon Eastern Standard Time on Instagram Live. And you can send me questions that you'd like me to answer on that show. So go ahead and send me a direct message on Instagram. Or on Sundays, I usually post saying, send me your questions. You can post your comments and questions under that as well. So see you then, and then also see you again next week on Scottlin Talks. Be well and have a joyful week.